May I now ask the members of the first panel to join me on the stage, please? We're going to talk in the first panel about old and new, about the changes. Please feel free to take a seat here. And my panelists are Guy Farley, who is the co-founder and chief technical officer of Bought by Many from the United Kingdom. He would be referred to by the IAIS as the innovator. And then next to him is sitting Gary Shaughnessy, CEO of EMEA Zurich Insurance Switzerland. He would be called by the IAIS the incumbent. So we'll have a debate between innovators and incumbents, ladies and gentlemen. Now, one thing about the setup today is that if you have questions at the end of the session, you can ask those using an app. Don't ask me how to do that. I wasn't raised at the time that apps existed, but apparently you will be able to do that. I will then finally find out what you ask me in questions at the end of the session. But let's start. Gary, I want to start with you. As this is the first panel of today, we want to hear a little bit about what are the positives and the negatives for the industry and consumers that follow from this fintech digitalization development. So how do you look at that?
Morning, Carol. I mean, first thing, thank you for referring to me as the incumbent rather than the old. I'm glad you used that phrase. I think to start with, though, when we look at this, we have to go back to what is the industry actually about? What are we trying to deliver? And just picking up on the phrase that the Mayor used in her opening address, it seems to me we're about three things. Firstly, we're about understanding and pricing risk. Secondly, we're about engaging with consumers, with companies, with intermediaries to help them understand risk and to help people protect themselves, their families, their properties, their employees, and their future. And in thirdly, we're about being there when things go wrong. And it seems to me that digitalization, cognitive computing, data analytics, the broader march of technology can help enormously in all three of those areas. Just a simple example from our perspective, we can now use cognitive computing to access and analyze medical records to make claims decisions in a matter of seconds where it would have taken nearly an hour previously. And I think there's some wonderful opportunities. We paid out about $11 billion in claims to 3 million people last year in Europe. In this room, there are people who represent companies that paid millions or billions of dollars and represented millions of customers. The key thing, though, to directly answer your question is the positives all rely on us embracing the opportunities but delivering against the customer need. Where things go wrong for us in the industry is where we start with the technology and find a home for it, as opposed to starting with the consumer and delivering against their needs.
Good. Well, that's interesting to see that this development affects the whole of your business. But let's then turn to Guy. My first question is, do you have a dog?
So maybe I should take a second to explain why you asked that question.
Yes, please. I mean, the audience may not be familiar with that.
So let me just take 30 seconds to say what Bought by Many is. We are a fintech startup from the UK. We use a combination of search and social media to identify people with niche insurance requirements. So whether that's insuring their Affenpinscher, or they've got a house full of expensive road bikes, or the house is on a floodplain, or they want to go traveling with, and they have diabetes. All these people generally find insurance quite difficult to get to meet that need. So our role is to find those people, put them into groups, and then negotiate or find the right deal for them to get better insurance for those people from across the industry. And better means either that we negotiate a discount from the insurance provider because we bring a bulk of people, or it might mean that we find a product that they would find difficult to find themselves. We've been around for about 5 years, and the reason you asked that question is that by far the largest part of our business is pet insurance. And sadly, the answer is no. I don't have a dog because I'm horribly allergic.
Okay, yes, but maybe you have a cat. That's also admissible.
Even more allergic to cats.
Yes, yeah.
We do insure guinea pigs, though, and I'd like to mention to our Swiss colleagues that we do a 15% multi-pet discount.
Yes,
If you're interested.
very good. Very good. So you've been expanding actually your business into other areas because it was first pet insurance. And is that what you're doing? Would you call that insurtech?
So from our perspective, insurtech is a sector, and we are squarely part of that sector. We're VC funded, and the VCs see insurtech as a sector that they really want to put money in. And so, I guess my definition, and probably the VC's definition of insurtech, is companies that have grown up around a technology, and in our case, that's integration into social media and online sales, and have a sort of insurance business model, if you like, but the whole company is built around technology, and so that's sort of our definition and certainly where we come from.
Excellent. If I go back to you, Gary, this development that you have been describing, is this mainly a question of increasing efficiency in the company, or would you also consider that the relationship with the consumer is changing as a result of digitalization?
I'd actually say it's more about the relationship with the consumer than just about efficiency. I mean, I think digitalization and automation can make huge strides in terms of efficiency, but I come back to my starting point, which is what are you delivering to the consumer and why? And we see this again and again, that the ability to interact with consumers also helps us to help them prevent claims in the first place, as an example. So, just efficiently managing a claim is one thing. If we can work with people to reduce the risk, use smart technology to monitor activity in homes, in workplaces, and stop the claims happening in the first place, that must be a better solution for the customer, and it's a better solution for us as an insurer.
Yes, Guy, I think that you, by definition, you are first going to the consumers and then you build your product or your contacts. What's your experience with that?
So I know I'm not supposed to, but I entirely agree with Gary on this. So we interact with people on Facebook, which I think is quite unique in insurance. We put sponsored posts onto Facebook every day, and we have hundreds of communications and comments from people on those posts, and we have full-time members of staff who are on Facebook, all day, every day into the evening, and for some of them that's their dream job. And they just respond to people's comments and questions as dispassionately and as informatively as possible. And for us, that's a fantastic source of information. All of those comments are insights into what people like and, frankly, largely dislike about insurance. And we've used those comments, we've analysed 40,000 of those comments from people to design features into products that we know the market needs. And I think that is something that is far more difficult for the incumbent suppliers, just by not having that sort of social media element to their business in the same way as we're able to.
But the people who are in contact with the consumers, who are they? What kind of staff do you use to entertain that contact?
So they're definitely what I guess we would describe as digital natives. They're people who are certainly much younger than me, who are naturally on social media the whole time, but then we obviously then spend an awful lot of time with them, making sure that they understand our products, understand the insurance industry to some degree. But a lot of what they do is to say, we sympathise with that issue, and here's a piece of material that we've written about how you might want to address that problem.
Could they become robots?
So I don't think they could, to be honest. I think they could if the answers that we expected from them were sort of rote, if you like. But we expect more from that. We expect some sort of humanization, some sort of sympathies, and so I think we certainly don't have that on our horizon.
Okay, but Gary, if you hear a guy talking like that, do you see him as a threat to the traditional business of insurers, or is it an opportunity? Do you look in terms of cooperation, or how do you see that?
I don't see him as a threat. What I see is, whether it's Guy or other new business models that innovate, pushing boundaries in terms of understanding customers, being very clear about particular customer groups and working with them. That puts a challenge to us to do the same thing, and it also allows us to work with Guy and other companies in the same way. You know, we work with intermediaries, we work with consumers, we work with companies. What I would pick up on is it's amazing how responsive and interactive consumers are generally, not just those who would be described as digital natives. So finding and understanding ways of connecting with our customers. But this is also about intermediaries and brokers. So one of the real opportunities for me around digitalization is putting agents and brokers in a position where they can spend 90% of their time in contact with their customers, giving advice, engaging with their customers, rather than 90% of their time administering products and services that we ask them to do. So I think this is about increased engagement and understanding of customers. It's about moving from a silo of, you know, we have to compete to one where we do compete, but we partner and we engage and we understand what the customer needs and then deliver to it in a very efficient way.
So basically, what I seem to hear from both of you is that you put the customer first. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And that's quite amazing, because that was a debate in the regulatory community for some time. It was important that insurers would put the customers first. So basically, what you're saying is very good news. Ladies and gentlemen, this is very good news. The customer comes first, and it will, in the end, will it make insurance more attractive? Guy, what do you think?
So just on that customer's first point, you know, in the world we operate in, we can't afford to offend customers, because that their complaint is immediately back on social media and is reflected, you know, is multiplied by that effect. So, you know, a core part of our business is just making sure that we satisfy the customer at every stage in their interaction with us, and it's just we cannot afford to do anything else.
It's great. Yes.
But to your point, I mean, for me, there is no conflict between delivering to your shareholders and delivering to your customers. I mean, if you deliver value to your customers,
Of course.
you'll deliver value to your shareholders. As simple as that. I don't think this industry has, necessarily been proud enough of the fact that we pay billions and billions of dollars of claims every year to consumers right the way across the world. The challenge we have is, how do we make sure we articulate things that are in jargon, in complex regulation, in processes, in a way that people really identify with. People don't perceive, in many countries, they don't perceive that the insurance industry pays claims.
Yes.
You know, the facts are that we pay, as an industry, lots of money out to people every year, but people don't perceive it.
You are responsible for EMEA, which I suppose stands for Europe, Middle East and Africa.
Correct.
I've always wondered why people adopt that sort of combination of countries, but we'll ask you afterwards in private. But what I'd like to hear from you is, do you see these technological changes appearing in certain markets more than in other markets? Where is it starting? I mean, the UK, of course. Which markets are the more active in this area?
I don't think the technology is necessarily different, but I think the application is different. So if I go back to, the point I was making about brokers, clearly there are some markets where the broker market an advisor market is a much bigger part of the way that insurance connects with consumers. In some markets, aggregators and comparison sites are a much bigger part. So it's about how it connects, rather than necessarily that there's one market that's driving forward with technology and others that are laggards.
Yes. Going back to you, Guy, will the consumer still know who is insuring them? Because you sort of bring them together and then you offer that as a potential insurance issue.
Yep.
Does the consumer know it's Zurich doing that, or it's AXA, or?
So we operate two models. One where we literally pass people from our website over to the insurer's website, and in that case, it's very clear that you've gone on to the insurer's website and you've transacted directly with the insurer. We also have our own products, which are sort of branded, bought by many, but underwritten by largely Munich, actually. And I guess we're the same as any other distributor in that respect, that the bottom of your documentation says ultimately who underwrites it, but whether consumers get to that part of the documentation, I'm not sure, but we don't have a different model, if you like, to to other brokers and distributors.
Yes.
Gary,
Yes, please.
perhaps I could pick up on that. I mean, I think that one of the challenges that raises for insurers is how to move beyond price as the only element of the decision. And as I said, I think we can be really clear about how we can help people prevent risk, and technology is an important part of doing that. You know, I talk about, we're doing some work with a housing association at the moment in terms of monitoring their properties for activity, for early warning signs of incidents happening. Now, that can potentially reduce the ultimate cost and the likelihood of something going wrong. That's not just about what's the price of the insurance. And so I think the challenge for us is to help make sure that we communicate the breadth of what we do and the consumer benefits in a way that's relevant for people like Guy, as well as relevant for the consumer, without trying to, you know, modify their business model, because that's not the answer. The answer is to put it in the terms that are relevant for the consumer and the intermediary.
To follow up on your idea about prevention, which is of course also linked to the question of big data.
Yeah.
Where do you get your data to help the consumers prevent risks from happening and communicating that to them? Where do you get your data from?
Oh gosh, I mean, that's a long subject. But
it's important.
It is an important subject, but I mean, we get an enormous amount of data about the customer from them. We get data from public sources. We get, I mean, the smart technology in terms of home monitoring, that's data once the individual or the company has become a customer. So we can track that data and take action as a result of it. I mean, I don't think there's a shortage of data, and there's no shortage of computing and analytical capability to manage it. There are clearly questions about appropriateness of particular data, and ethical questions and so on, but that as an industry is something, you know, I think the industry is very well engaged in.
Do you find that people are ready to give all kinds of data to you? Because as you communicate through Facebook and so on, I keep hearing from others, because I'm definitely not on Facebook, from others that they just have anything, they show their pictures, they do. Yeah. Because you collect all that information, how does it work?
Yeah, so around 60% of our members, we consider them members rather than customers, yes, authenticate with Facebook when they reach our site. That gives us access to certain elements of their Facebook data, so some basic profile information, their likes, that we also know from that who the other members of Bought by Many are that they know at the time they log in, so we can show them those people to give them some reassurance. But that's about the extent of it. You can ask for more when people log in with Facebook, but we don't. And I think there is a sort of a bit of a myth grown up around it's a wild west of data out there, and actually Facebook and the other social networks have worked very hard to close that down. I think it was 5 years ago you could, you know, hit the Facebook API and basically, you know, pull all the data back, but they're much tighter on that now, and I think quite rightly so. You know, so from our perspective, gaining that Facebook data just allows us to hopefully more accurately provide information to people about the other offers that we have that they might be interested in, and hopefully it allows us to reduce the amount of sort of outbound communication to them, because we know what's irrelevant to them. So I think used responsibly, it's, you know, it's a fantastic tool for us and the insurer, and hopefully for the consumer as well.
Good. We've just been talking about today, but let's now look a little bit at tomorrow. Where would your company be tomorrow? How do you see you evolving into the future? Are you going to link up with an incumbent, or are you going to remain an innovator and work with other innovators? How do you see that future development tomorrow?
So I mean, firstly, we are already linked up with the incumbents. We have relationships with about 31 insurance companies for whom we distribute product. I think we will end up owning more of the value chain, so designing and pricing more of our products, but still they'll almost certainly be underwritten by an incumbent. And the reason we see that as the future is just we have so much great information from people about what they want to see in those products. And to be frank, when we've tried to persuade the industry to make products for us or modify products for us, they find that very difficult. And I think a large part of that is IT legacy, actually, rather than lack of will or ambition. It's just to turn out a new product is hard work for an insurance company. and so for us, it's easier. We don't have that legacy to deal with. So I think the future for us is more of our own products, hopefully more countries, and then more and more interesting ways to engage with consumers. So, we've done prototypes of bots inside Facebook Messenger. We've done prototypes of Alexa skills to talk to people and get quotes from their Alexa. And we will continue to look at all of those channels. And I guess the other thing is the social networks are changing. Right now, Facebook is interesting for us because it's a sort of 35 to 55, 35 to 60 demographic who buy insurance. But anyone below that age is on Instagram. So at some point, Instagram will need to come onto our horizon, and presumably other social networks.
Okay. What does the incumbent think when you hear a guy talking like that? Are you say, I'm going to swallow these people, or do you want to see them sitting around you? You sit in the middle and you have all these innovators developing all kinds of tools and systems contacting you. How do you see the future?
I mean, the first thing is I don't think there's any monopoly on good ideas. So if whoever you are, if you choose to partner or acquire companies, there'll be someone else who comes up with a good innovation. So I think the whole philosophy of constantly innovating, constantly trying to improve based on a consumer need is key. I also don't necessarily buy that this is about legacy systems versus clean platforms. I mean, interesting, you mentioned Amazon Alexa. That's something that we're about to pilot quotes on in Germany at the moment. So I think it's about innovation and how you adapt to what the consumer need is and put it in place. I think we tend to be more focused on how do we understand and prevent risk, because that's the core of an insurance company's value add. And if we don't do that, then our right to communicate and engage with the consumer becomes severely diminished. So I think there's a thing about an ecosystem of partnerships, whether they're long or short term, innovation that comes within the business, innovation that comes from the customer, comes from business partners, and I don't think there's any conflict in that.
Would you consider the innovators as a kind of a challenge for you to consider more innovation, or to put it more as a priority, or would you say, well, it would have happened anyway?
Oh, look, I think if you see people being innovative and changing the way that they interact with customers, I don't see it as a challenge. I think it's a really exciting part of the way that we as a business, we as an industry, frankly, all industries develop. Would it have happened anyway? I just think that's, in a sense, that's not the point for me. The point for me is embrace the opportunities that come with this. Risk is actually fragmenting. There are more risks for consumers, more risks for companies. We have to be more innovative in the way that we understand those risks, what actually matters to them and what they want to be covered for and what they don't want to be covered for. And also to recognize most consumers don't get up in the morning and say, I want to go and get myself home insurance or life insurance. Most small businesses want to run their business. Insurance is a necessary evil in some senses, and I think our job is to make it as easy to understand and easy to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your future as possible, rather than pretend it's the most important thing for someone who's running a retailer or any other type of company.
Are you not actually also trying to do that? Because before you get a group of people on a specific risk together, you have to convince them that they have to take that risk seriously. Are you taking that initiative, and you get then out to the market and try to find people who have a similar risk? So you basically are advertising insurance, basically.
Yes, precisely. So we work very hard to provide materials and education for consumers. I think we have around about 700 articles we've written during the lifetime of the business on various sort of aspects of insurance, if you like. So a typical one would be, if you're a cyclist with expensive road bikes, how do you get those? What's the best way to get those bikes insured? And so that education piece for us is absolutely key, and it's been a real eye-opener for us. I think the level of engagement we've had. We really thought when we started interacting with Facebook that we would be kind of seeing it as an advertising channel, if you like, but actually it's turned into much, much more than an advertising channel. It's really a collaboration channel where people tell us an awful lot about what they need from insurance, and the level of engagement has overwhelmed us or surprised us, I would say.
That's quite interesting. Now, with my regulatory background, the question that pops up in my mind is, are you regulated?
Yeah, so we're regulated in the UK
As what?
as a broker.
As a broker, yes.
Yeah.
That would seem to be the appropriate way of considering it, yes. Because what you're doing is basically broking, eh?
Right, it is, yes. So
Yes,
I mean, I think we are the kind of next generation of broker. I think the value that the high street brokers, and I know this is different across Europe, but certainly in the UK, there really aren't high street brokers anymore because the direct and price comparison sites have made that, just unviable as a business model. So I think we've sort of stepped in and we provide the level of sort of market expertise and customer communication online that brokers used to provide on the high streets. And I think that is, a valuable place to be.
Excellent.
Just
Yes.
one comment on that. I think you're right in terms of brokers in respect of things like motor insurance, for example. But the broker market is actually, small businesses, for example,
Yeah.
is very vibrant in the UK. And I think it would be a mistake to assume that digitalisation means getting rid of the human input. Actually, for me, it's more about making sure that what you're doing is relevant to the customer. And as I said before, do you want your advisor or broker spending 90% of the time administering paperwork, or do you want them spending the time understanding your risks, helping you manage them, helping you understand what you could or couldn't do, and protecting your interests at the points that a claim happens, for example? And I think a lot of brokers have remodeled their businesses so that they're much more focused on that part of their business rather than the admin side.
In fact, they become better allies for you.
Well, they become both. They become, an ally for us in the sense that if we provide value, they're knowledgeable individuals who help explain that in a way that's relevant to their customers, but they also become advocates for their customers with us, and I think that's a really good thing.
If you look now at insurance as a sector and as an activity, which can be split up in different things like underwriting, claims management, and so on and so forth, which is the area that you believe the insurers will always keep for themselves? I mean, what is the typical insurance area? If the innovators are going to take care of lots of what you would be doing before, what is the typical insurance activity?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between where your business is focused and where you add value, and the notion that you would keep something for yourself. I don't think I look at it that way. I think we have to understand and prevent risk, and we have to be able to communicate that in a way that is relevant and appropriate for customers so that they see value in that, and we then need to make sure when something goes wrong, we're there to help. I don't think you can say that's exclusive. The reinsurance market, the broking market will move up and down parts of the value chain. I think the important thing for us is to make sure we're clear on at the core of where we add value. But if that's all we do, and we can't communicate and engage with customers in a way that's relevant to them, then that's a problem. But if we don't understand risk and help prevent it, then what are we?
Good. Guy, if you look now at the way you're operating and the risks that you're dealing with, what would you consider a typical risk that you believe is not yet properly addressed by the insurance industry, and you believe we need to do something about it?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that I would say that there's risks that aren't addressed. I would say
Problems?
the product design is sometimes
Okay.
not as the customer would want it. I'll give a very one simple example is we've just launched a pet product in the UK where the premium for the pet is fixed for the life of the pet, as long as you buy the policy before it's 2 years old. And that's a direct response to lots of, I guess, anger that we see of, people have had a pet for 8 years, they haven't claimed anything, and suddenly the premium goes up threefold because the pet's turned 8. And I don't think the risk is particularly changed, and there are people who are happy to underwrite it. It's just that the product was frustrating the customer, if you like. And so I think that's where we can help, in the sense that we get that feedback more imminently than the insurers do, and therefore we can provide that into the product design.
Yeah. Now I have a personal question for you. I have a dog,
Yeah.
but it is not insured. Should I have pet insurance?
Well, so the answer, I think, is simply yes. I think the bit that lots of people forget is the liability aspect of owning a dog. Certainly in the UK, if your dog...
My dog is well behaving, I can tell you.
I'm sure. Certainly in the UK, you are legally liable for the actions of your dog, and therefore, if it runs into the street, that's a big problem for you. And vet fees are constantly increasing, so people now have MRI scans and cruciate replacements and chemotherapy for their pets, which most people simply cannot afford to pay for. So I think it's becoming a necessity.
A necessity, yes, okay. But isn't that a typical British type of insurance, pet insurance?
It's certainly, there's certainly a high penetration of pet insurance in the
Yes.
UK. But actually Sweden has a higher penetration of pet insurance than the UK.
What about Switzerland? Is pet insurance an issue in Switzerland?
It's an issue, but not a large one compared to the UK and Switzerland.
Yeah,
certainly.
so.
Just this point on digitalisation, though,
Yes.
in respect of the conversation you've just had. I mean, for me, that ability to personalise, I come back to our challenge as an industry is quite often the amount of jargon, the amount of explanation that goes alongside. If you have a critical illness policy, what does it cover? What doesn't it cover? What's a pre-existing condition, etc. One of the wonderful things for me about digital capabilities is that the consumer can drill down to the extent that's relevant and appropriate for them, rather than always having, 50 pages of terms and conditions, etc. And I do think one of the challenges that was mentioned right at the start by the President was this whole issue of regulation that doesn't naturally move from paper to digital format, and that we've got to crack that one.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. The biggest, probably single challenge for our design teams in terms of our user interface is that 70% of people come to us on a mobile device. And so communicating insurance products and the choices between insurance products in that sort of small format is a huge challenge, and we work incredibly hard to make that as clean as possible, but we're always mindful that we also have, we have a responsibility to put a certain level of information and communication out there. So yeah, I would echo that it would be great to have more guidance and more understanding in that area.
Would you then agree with me that this development is actually going to bring to the outside world more knowledge and appreciation for the role the insurance industry can play in society? Would you agree with that?
If we manage it right, but I don't think that's the purpose in a sense. I think what we should be bringing is relevant information and knowledge, and I think if we could change the perception that as an insurance industry we don't pay claims, for example, just that simple one issue. And every country I go to has a version of that. It may be more striking or less striking. But actually as an industry, we pay out billions of claims, dollars of claims every year to people at the point that they really need us. And we have a perception that that's actually not what we do. And if we could change that, that would make a massive difference, I think, to people's comfort in actually insuring themselves properly and appropriately, and in the way that the industry works.
But isn't it true that most people don't even know that there is a linkage between a risk and a premium?
I think there's a spectrum, actually. So we, as I said, the people that communicate with us obviously have some knowledge, and I think a lot of that knowledge is driven out of the fact that the people we communicate with have a very specific problem that they've been trying to solve for a while. Yes. Whether it's they have a medical condition, they want to get travel insurance, and because that thing affects their lives, or they've got a road bike or a pet that they love, then they're very engaged with protecting that thing or getting themselves on holiday. I think at the other end of the spectrum, where you've just got a family car and you just know you have to insure it, then I think people aren't required to understand as much. They just want to find the lowest price and get the job done and go home.
Good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is exactly 10:30, yes, and we have to finish the panel. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking the panelists for their contribution. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you. Thanks so much. Very well done. Excellent.